Oh, why hello there, and welcome to Frank Reads. I'm Frank Hasemuller, and I've been reading some of my favorite stories lately, and I thought I'd share them with you. I enjoy them, and I hope you will too. Today we're going to Japan for a story from a collection called Tales of Moonlight and Rain. It was written by Ueda Akinari in the year 1776. Which places it roughly in the middle part of the Edo period of Japanese history, which was a time of relative calm and stability after over a century of civil war. Now, the stories in this collection are part of a Japanese literary genre called Kaidan, and usually the word Kaidan is translated into ghost story in English, but that's not entirely accurate. A more accurate interpretation would be a tale of the strange, or a story of the unusual. And this one certainly fits the bill. It is called The Carp of My Dreams. Long ago, in the Insho era, there was a monk at Midera named Koji, who was recognized as a master painter. He did not limit himself to painting Buddhas, landscapes, or birds and flowers. On days when he was free from temple chores, he would go out on the lake in a small boat and give money to fishermen in exchange for fish that they had caught with their nets and hooks. And then he would release them into the bay, watch them swim about, and paint them. And as he did this over the years, he became extremely precise and skilled. Once, as he concentrated on a painting, he grew sleepy and dreamed that he had gone into the water and was swimming about with all kinds of fish, large and small. As soon as he woke up, he painted exactly what he had seen and fastened the painting to his wall. He called it The Carp of My Dreams. Marveling at how wonderful his paintings were, people jostled for a place in line to acquire them. But Koji, though he happily gave his flowers, birds, and landscapes to anyone who wanted them, stubbornly held on to his paintings of carp. Playfully he would say, "This monk will never give away the fish he has reared to ordinary laymen who kill living things and eat fresh meat." Word of his paintings and of this joke spread throughout the realm. One year, he fell ill and, after 7 days, suddenly closed his eyes, stopped breathing, and lost consciousness. His disciples and friends came together to grieve, but, finding that his chest was still a little warm, they gathered around him to keep watch, thinking that he might recover. And, after 3 days, his arms and legs seemed to move a little, and he suddenly heaved a long sigh, opened his eyes, and sat up as though awakening from sleep. "I have forgotten human affairs for a long time," he said to the people around him. "How many days have passed?" His disciples said, "Master, you stopped breathing 3 days ago. People from throughout the temple, and others you have always been close to, came to discuss your funeral, but noticing that your chest was still warm, we watched you without putting you in a coffin. And now that you have come back to life, we are all rejoicing that, fortunately, we did not bury you." Koji nodded. "Someone go to the house of our Dhanapati, the Taira officer, and report that I have mysteriously come back to life. The officer is now pouring sake and preparing thinly sliced fish, but ask him to interrupt his banquet for a moment and come to the temple. Say that I will tell him a most unusual tale, and look closely at what everyone there is doing. Repeat exactly what I have told you, nothing else." The messenger was dubious, but he went to the mansion, gave the message to an intermediary, and then stealthily looked inside. The officer, his younger brother Juro, his retainer Komori, and others were seated in a circle, drinking sake. The messenger was startled, because the scene was exactly as his master had said it would be. When they heard the message, the people in the officer's house were greatly surprised. Putting down his chopsticks, the officer went to the temple, attended by Juro and Komori. Raising his head from the pillow, Koji thanked his visitor for coming, and the officer congratulated Koji on his recovery. Then Koji said, "Listen to what I have to say. Have you ever bought fish from that fisherman named Bunshi?" Startled, the officer replied, "Yes, I have indeed. How did you know?" Koji said, "The fisherman entered your gate with a basket containing a fish more than 3 feet long. You were in the south wing, playing Go with your younger brother. Komori was sitting beside you, eating a large peach and watching the game. Delighted by the big fish that the man had brought, you gave him a tray of peaches and shared your sake with him. The cook proudly took out the fish and cut it into thin slices. Am I right so far?" Hearing this, the officer and his men, suspicious and confused, pressed him to explain how he knew these things in such detail. Koji told them. The suffering caused by my illness became unbearable. Unaware that I had stopped breathing, I leaned on my staff and went out through the gate, hoping to relieve the feverishness a little, whereupon my illness began to ease, and I felt like a caged bird returning to the land of clouds. Making my way through mountains and villages, I arrived again at the edge of the lake. When I saw the pale jade water, I felt reality slip away and thought that I would have a swim, and so, shedding my robe, I threw myself in, plunged to the depths, and swam here and there, frolicking as I pleased, even though I am not one who grew accustomed to the water as a child. I realize now that it was all a foolish dream, but a man cannot float in the water with the ease of a fish. I began to wish that I could disport myself like a fish. Nearby was a large fish who said, "The master's wish is easily granted. Please wait here." He disappeared into the depths, but soon a man, wearing a crown and robes, ascended toward me, sitting astride the same large fish and leading many other fish behind him. He said to me, "I bear a message from the lake god. You, old monk, have acquired much merit by releasing creatures that were captured by men. Now you have entered the water and wish to swim about like a fish. For a time, we will give you the garb of a golden carp and let you enjoy the pleasures of the water world. But you must be careful not to be tempted by the fragrance of bait, get caught on a line, and lose your life." Having said this much, he disappeared. Astonished, I looked at myself and found that I had acquired golden, glowing scales and turned into a carp. Not thinking this particularly strange, I swished my tail, moved my fins, and rambled about as I pleased. First I rode the waves that were raised by the wind blowing down from Mount Nagara, and then, wandering along the edge of the great bay of Shinga, I was startled by people strolling back and forth, so close to the water that their skirts got wet, and so I tried to dive in the depths where high Mount Hira casts its reflection. But I found it hard to hide myself when the fishing flares of Kadada at night drew me, as though I were dreaming. The moon, resting on the waters of the berry black night, shone clear on the peak of Mount Kagami, and drove the shadows from the 80 corners of the 80 ports to cast a lovely scene. Okino Isle, Shikubu Isle. The vermilion fence reflected in the waves startled me. Soon I was awakened from my dreams among the reeds, as the Asazuma boat rode out in the wind from Mount Ibuki. I dodged the practiced oar of the Yabase ferryman, and many times was driven away by the bridge guard of Seta. When the sun grew warm, I rose to the surface. When the wind was strong, I swam in the depths. Suddenly feeling hungry, I searched here and there for something to eat. I swam around frantically, unable to find anything, until I came upon the line that Bunshi was dangling in the water. His bait was wonderfully fragrant. Then I remembered the lake god's warning. I am a disciple of the Buddha. How should I stoop to eating fish bait just because I've been unable to find food for a while? I swam away. With time, the hunger grew steadily worse, and I reconsidered, thinking, I can hardly bear it any longer. Even if I swallowed the bait, would I be so reckless as to get caught? I have known Bunshi for a long time. Why should I hold back? I took the bait. Bunshi promptly hauled in the line and caught me. "Hey, what are you doing?" I cried, but pretending not to hear me, he passed a cord through my chin, tied up his boat in the reeds, placed me in a basket, and went in through your gate. You were in the south room, playing Go with your younger brother. Komori sat nearby, eating fruit. Seeing the large fish that Bunshi had brought, everyone was delighted and congratulated him. At this point, I spoke to all of you. "Have you forgotten Koji? Release me, please! Let me go back to the temple!" I cried again and again, but you pretended not to hear and just clapped your hands in delight. The cook pressed both of my eyes hard with the fingers of his left hand, took up a well-sharpened knife in his right hand, placed me on the chopping block, and was about to cut when I screamed in agony, "Is there any precedent for hurting a disciple of the Buddha this way? Help me! Help me!" I cried, but no one listened. When I felt that I was about to be cut, I awakened from my dream. Everyone was deeply moved and amazed. "Thinking about the master's story," said the officer, "I remember seeing the fish's mouth move each time, but there was no voice at all. It is marvelous to have seen such a thing with my own eyes." Sending a messenger running to his house, he had the remaining slices of fish thrown into the lake. After this, Koji recovered completely and lived for many years before he died of old age. As his end approached, he took the many carp that he had painted and released them into the lake, where the fish left the paper and silk to swim about in the water. For this reason, none of Koji's paintings survived. A disciple named Niramitsu inherited Koji's divine skill and became famous in his time. It is recorded in an old tale that he painted a chicken on a sliding door at the Kanin Palace, and when a live chicken saw the painting, he kicked it. Well, there you go. There is The Carp of My Dreams from Tales of Moonlight and Rain by Ueda Akinari. It is definitely a tale of the strange, and it's interesting too, because it's essentially, in the end, it's revealed that it was all a dream, but it was a dream that was actually happening. And it's interesting too, it could also see some Buddhist themes in it, because you remember at the beginning, Koji kept all of his carp paintings for himself, but then at the end he let them go, and they ended up magically swimming away. Well, I enjoyed that story, and I hope you did too. So I hope you will join me next time. And until then, keep reading.